right, welcome back, guys, to this latest deep dive of Unfinished Business. I am your co-host, Andre Joseph of AJ Epics Productions, and I have my nice little deep dive for Black History Month. Happy Black History Month for everybody again. And as always, the main man himself, Mr. Jeff Galashaw.
Hello, everyone. I am here.
So we're going to go back to 2002 with a little Dog Day Afternoon style drama slash thriller called John Q, starring Denzel Washington, the legendary and Oscar-winning Denzel Washington. Now, this is a movie that came out right after Training Day, after his Oscar win for that film, and this was actually shot before Training Day. And I don't know if it was one of those movies that didn't test well and they just shelved it, or if they just said, well, Training Day is going to be really good, so let's wait until that comes out, we'll piggyback on it. Either way, it was a big hit when it came out, even though the reviews were not the greatest. So John Q stars Denzel and Kimberly Elise playing his wife, and this is the first of many collaborations they would have together. They play a struggling blue-collar family. I believe he's a factory worker, and they're constantly having financial issues, but they're a loving family. They're there for their son, who's, a baseball player at school, and, he wants to, be big and strong one day. And one day he ends up having a heart condition that puts him in the hospital. And it turns out that he needs a specific heart transplant operation in order to survive. Unfortunately, with our healthcare system being as screwed up as it is, it's going to cost pretty much like the mortgage of a house in order for them to get the transplant done, and an upfront fee that's even just as ridiculous that they can't afford. They try to go for all the legal means. They try fundraising. They go to the press. They do everything humanly possible. They even try to go for their own insurers. Nothing's working out. And it gets to the breaking point where they're going to release the kid from the hospital and just let him die. And it's like, you got to do something. We got to have a miracle of some sort. And they're, God-fearing family. So Denzel gets himself a gun. He tries to go to James Woods, who's the surgeon that's supposed to do the operation, and tries to plead with him to at least make this one favor, because you're making so much money, just at least make just one exception here. And of course, James Woods, being James Woods, says no. Denzel takes the hospital hostage and won't leave until his son gets a heart transplant. Now, he has the waiting room pretty much held hostage, and very quickly, the people in the waiting room, even the few doctors and, physician's assistants, are behind him. They get it. Meanwhile, outside, you have Robert Duvall playing the usual cliche cop that just wants to stop the situation and doesn't want to give in to the demands. But then you also have Ray Liotta playing the overzealous chief who wants to end the situation quickly. He wants to send the SWAT team in and take Denzel out. And so it becomes like sort of a race against time and trying to decide what to do. He becomes a media hero, and, things kind of get tense. And that's pretty much John Q in a nutshell. It's Dog Day Afternoon all over again. It's very cliched. The reason the movie works and why it's enjoyable is because of Denzel Washington. It's like, no matter what role he plays, you get behind him, you believe in him. Even if he's a villain, you find yourself sympathizing with him. And he just elevates mediocre material into something that you could really be feeling like it's a crowd pleaser. Because I know when I saw this in the theater, there were people in that crowd that were into every moment. Even when Anne Heche is like telling them, we can't do anything for this kid, there were girls in that audience like, kick his fucking ass and blah blah blah. Like they were just like throwing shit at the screen literally with this movie. That's how much they were into it. So for that, I still enjoy it. I still think it's a crowd pleaser. Jeff, what are your memories of John Q?
John Q, I know I didn't see it in theaters. I remember getting like so reviews, but it being like #1 at the box office, and this being like his first film after Training Day. And I felt like when I eventually did see it, Training Day he won the Oscar for, but this film more seemed like the Oscar type role that he would get nominated for. But like you said, what works in this film is his performance because, like you said, it is very cliche. Even downright, we have Eddie Griffin again as a hostage, like he was in The Negotiator. So it's just like, oh, this is way familiar. But again, Denzel elevates everything to another level, even among, acting all-stars surrounding him in this movie. And, because this is, I would say, Denzel's most relatable performance as a character for everybody. Because, he's just this decent man working hard, trying to do what's right. And, no matter what he does, the system is always down on him. And, for him, this movie is great. Other people in the film or other aspects of the film, it's a little, like you said, cliche and embarrassing, because, like, for instance, when the film starts off with the woman driving the BMW.
Yeah, that kind of takes you out of it.
Yeah, because it feels like this is a commercial we're watching at the beginning of the film. And, Anne Heche is here, but she doesn't really need to be in this movie, really. Like, anybody could have played this role. I mean, James Woods, I think this was one of his last films, like, where it made it to a theater, a major film, where he plays a memorable role. And, I mean, he plays, like, kind of the scumbaggy doctor perfectly, I mean, and Nick Cassavetes directed this film, who is a good director.
Yeah.
And, this is near and dear to his heart because, not literally, I guess, because his daughter also has the same congenital heart disease in real life that, Denzel Washington's son has in the film. And he has his, usual cast of actors, Kevin Connolly, Ethan Suplee in, like, smaller supporting roles. I was waiting to see Harry Dean Stanton somewhere, but not in this movie because he's another Nick Cassavetes veteran. But, this movie, it's what some people might, well, maybe me and you as film fans might call more of a guilty pleasure, whereas most people be like, no, this is one of my favorite movies of all time. Like I said, Eddie Griffin, kind of like same role from the other movie. Kimberly Elise is affecting in her scenes.
Yeah.
The ones they actually give her solo. Laura Herring is almost unrecognizable if you had seen Mulholland Drive, as his best friend's wife. And I don't know if you know who David Thornton is, who plays his best friend.
Okay, yeah, I know who he is.
Yeah, I've seen him in many other films. And, some of you might, know who he's married to. But he's a fine actor in his own right. And unfortunately, he has one of the most cringe-inducing scenes when he's interviewed, like, by the news to kind of explain what John Wick is going through. And remember when we were talking about in another episode where things aren't subtle? That scene in particular. And his delivery is kind of, you can tell he's acting. It doesn't feel heartfelt.
Yeah.
It is nothing against him. I more blame the script there. But it hits the points it's supposed to. So this film, I actually, like, again, I want to call it a guilty pleasure, but like you said, Denzel makes it into that kind of, no, this is a decent movie, But I just remember when I saw it on, I guess, DVD, it didn't make me cry, but it did get me, especially the scene that gets everybody, where when they're saying that he can't have the heart, where he's willing to kill himself just so his son can have the heart. And, it was like, damn, so, and do you know what the original ending was?
He was going to kill himself. And then
exactly. But, they wanted to have a crowd pleaser. It's like, oh, such and such happens and, he's going to have a good life after all. And that's maybe where it really starts hitting false notes, towards the end, that ending.
Well, yeah, I would say this film, there's two issues with it. Outside of, there's a lot to enjoy as a guilty pleasure and as a movie that, you get behind Denzel. He elevates the material. There are two big issues that I will say. One is they definitely try to hammer you over the head about the commentary about the healthcare system and HMOs. You have like that whole scene where they're all sitting around while they're, I guess, waiting for the next move to happen. And Kevin Conley gets through that whole spiel about, how we just like kick people out of the hospital and give them like a band-aid and then that's it. We don't really do anything to help these people. So, like it seems like the intent is there. I see that, but it just feels like to get to that place, we're not being subtle. It's just, you have that coming. Like, remember when we were talking about Cobra Kai the other day, and you had the scene with Aisha coming back, and rather it being like a big plot point, it felt like a PSA about, oh, Cobra Kai is not that bad. It's actually helpful for self-esteem. There's other ways you could get around that issue. I think like when Denzel confronts James Woods and tells him how much money he's actually making as a surgeon, that he can't make this one exception, I think that's effective versus that moment. Second issue is those side characters like we were just talking about. So, I mean, I enjoy Eddie Griffin, but he feels like he should be in another movie. Sean Hattasey, or however you say his last name, I don't know if he's supposed to be like a pimp or a drug dealer, like him and the girl who's Nick Cassavetes' real life wife, where like, he's a scumbag, and then he tries to, be the hero, trying to attack Denzel, and then she pretty much kicks him in the balls and goes down. Like that also felt very cartoonish. Even the news reporter that says, oh yeah, I'm going to come and help you guys and, get the story out there. And then he ends up being kind of a scumbag just trying to get attention. There's a disconnect there. There's like some little subplots that don't pay off in this movie. And then the characters are just so over the top. It just makes Denzel even more of a straight man and more like he's trying to give an Oscar performance while everybody else is there to be like, almost as if they're doing a comedy or like a satirical picture versus something that's more dramatic and straight.
Well, it's just like what you were saying about the Sean Hattasey and his girlfriend moment where, we're dealing with a real life subject of domestic abuse, and is more played kind of for laughs. And then she finally finds the strength to stand up for him, and for herself, I should say. And, they treat it more like, oh, ha, 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 ha. And also, why out of all times did she choose now, if she had this whole thing of strength beforehand, and it also goes back to what you were saying about Denzel's trying to give this, Oscar winning performance. And it feels like almost like it's theater now, because now it felt like the writer was like, well, we have to make these other characters interesting somehow. So why don't we do this? And while, like you said, it's sort of like a Dog Day Afternoon kind of, situation. Obviously, Dog Day Afternoon is a classic. This film aspires to be that, but like I said, it just doesn't hit as much depth except for Denzel's character and obviously his family. Those are the one thing that, stay a thorough line throughout the film. And that's what, again, makes this film more noteworthy than anything else. Whereas the rest is like, you just deal with it just so you can stay with this main, thing. And, I know at the time, even though he had just won for Training Day, that there were like, oh, he's going to get nominated for an Oscar again. And unfortunately, he didn't. And this also shows, I mean, now he's legendary, but sometimes how some people underestimate what Denzel Washington brings. Of course, it's easy to impersonate him in some of his mannerisms and some of his roles, but they also sometimes overlook that dramatic depth he can bring to a role, when it's not like, oh, the remake of The Manchurian Candidate, obvious, like, yeah, okay, you're not going to get, the best out of him there. But when it's like, this movie, and even though not a big fan of it, but even like the little things, he brings a presence to these roles, that sometimes elevate something that could have been, cliche. Even, I don't believe I'm going to say it, even the Bone Collector, where, he's paralyzed, but there's something about his performance, even though he can barely move, that, he still is so masterful. Your eyes immediately go towards him, because because he seems to be the only one who's getting it. Not that anyone else is bad in the film, but obviously he's the MVP in the whole film.
Yeah, I would even make the example of Taking a Pelham 1, 2, 3, where, you know, like you're taking on a role that was originated by Walter Matthau, and I'm thinking he's going to be a cop, and that's going to be the same old shit. But then you see him, okay, he's a little preachy to John Travolta while going back and forth through the dispatch radio, but he plays his character as such this kind of introverted, kind of like almost awkward way about the situation he's in, that it makes the third act almost just weird when suddenly he springs into action and he's got to go stop him. It feels like now you're betraying who this character is supposed to be. I like when he's out of his depth in that type of situation. And he does that here too in John Q, where, yeah, he has the gun, he has the hostages. He really doesn't know what to do other than he just wants to get his son to surgery, but then having to deal with the pregnant woman, the kid with the diabetes and needs insulin, you know, like all these little situations that he feels overwhelmed. And he plays that so well that maybe the only thing that felt unrealistic is when he stops the SWAT team guy breaking into the building. Other than that, I mean, he plays that blue collar type really well.
Well, it's like, even though this is another film and another performance, I kind of like it when Denzel isn't playing cool. Like,
Yeah.
as much as I like, what is the name of this film? The one with Clive Owen, Spike Lee.
Inside Man.
Like, Inside Man, as much as I like his performance in that film, you feel like even when doesn't know exactly what's going on, he's in control. Because he's just so smooth and so cool. But then let's take a film like Out of Time, where basically he's the victim throughout, even though he's the one, you know, scrambling around trying to figure everything out with, you know, much younger women. But still, you know, it still feels like that is when you find it more interesting, because again, we're used to seeing Denzel in control, lording over everybody in the scene. And here, like you said, he's supposed to be the meek one running around trying to figure everything out and, you know, under the powers that be. And he's trying to connect everything. And, you know, and I mean, that and also a collection of, you know, Hawaiian shirts in that film. But, you know, that is one of those low key films, or the lowest key that you're going to get with Denzel Washington as a bona fide star, that I feel was there, that was like, let's say, missing in a movie like The Book of Eli, which just felt, again, he's still Mr. Cool, and it's all about style. And so, you know, I appreciate when he plays vulnerable, because he's not used to it. Mm-hmm. You know, he always is like, has to be somewhat in control, or even when he's surprised, he still tries to act like he's in control. So I like it when he generally goes anti-New York and shows himself as vulnerable, you know. And
yeah, I mean, that's all I can really say about John Q. It's a crowd pleaser. It's enjoyable. He is very good in it. It's flawed, but it is still, you know, just there's the Denzel movies that are Oscar worthy and just, you know, you put them on a pedestal, and then there's some that are just, they're good enough to be commercial but not excellent.
Okay. I agree. Where would you put this on the list of Denzel movies specifically?
I mean, to me, some of my top ones are like Malcolm X, Training Day, American Gangster, probably Remember the Titans. I think he was very good in. Flight is one of my favorites of his, because that was a totally different role. So I would say somewhere between 6 and 10 on the list, maybe like lower, like 9 or 10.
I agree, even though American Gangster wouldn't be on my top 10. But that's a personal thing. Yeah. But yeah, Denzel Washington, one of the greatest American actors that we have, and definitely one of the finest Black actors that we have. You know, I mean, look at just his resume, even his directing resume. I didn't see a Journal for Jordan, probably won't. But other than that, you know, pretty stellar career. Like, let me put it this way. he's he's not one to sneeze at in even in his worst movies. You know, he still can walk with his head held high. And no challenger so far to that throne.
No,
I thought
nobody.
nope. I thought maybe Wesley would one day, but unfortunately hasn't risen or hasn't gotten a chance to rise.
I think it's just it's a different business now than when he was starting out. Like, I mean, obviously he started out on St. Elsewhere, then he gradually got into movies, and then he won an Oscar for Glory, and then it's like that defined his career. Whereas now, whether it's Idris Elba or Michael B. Jordan or Omari Hardwick, you either become a big star on television, or you are a guy that's going to be doing big tentpole movies like Michael B. Jordan, for example. Like, yes, they'll go see him in Creed. They'll see him play Killmonger in Black Panther. Outside of that, though, his track record's still kind of questionable. You know, he's talented as hell, but the track record of what he does on his own, like Without Remorse or even Journal for Jordan, you know, where's that audience when those movies come out?
Well, I mean, it's true because I guess to a certain extent, Denzel is like still a star, but even after a while, he was like, I guess I got to go the action route, and then you got like Two Guns or the remake of The Magnificent Seven, which has its dramatic moments, but let's face it, it's more action than anything in Book of Eli. So I like that Denzel has changed with the times, but still gets to do the core roles that he wants to do, So, yeah, he might make it Two Guns, but then he'll come out with Flight. Even though that's a studio film, it's still obviously way more dramatic than Two Guns was. So, that's why I'm like, I always respect him, even when he makes movies I would never want to see necessarily, or, direct movies I might not want to see, but I'll always give him the respect. I mean, I even watched Kenneth Branagh's Much Ado About Nothing just to see him.
Oh, yeah. No, I've seen him in school.
Yeah, so it's like, I will follow him, to certain places. I even saw Virtuosity in theaters.
I saw that in Florida with my uncle.
Oh, man. Now there's a deep dive.
We're talking about that soon, yeah.
Okay. But like I said, Denzel, for the most part, can do no wrong. And I would advise people definitely check this movie out. You might, if you haven't already, you might be pleasantly surprised. You might be like, oh, this is bullshit. But I think it's definitely a movie you should definitely check out and give a chance to. So that ends this week's business. But as you know, there's always unfinished business to be had. And I have to ask, have you seen The Last Seduction? If not, why not? Because it's fucking awesome. Andre, what film?
Have you seen Virtuosity? If not, why not? Because it's fucking awesome.
Okay, I might not agree with that, but okay, we'll talk about that soon. So with that, we will see you next time, folks. Hope you enjoyed the show, and please feel free to comment and share.